halfway through the GCSE exam season now, and a lot of you are probably fed up and tired of it. You want it all to be over and done with, but we still have a little way to go, and what you really need to be doing is thinking about the future in terms, well, with a positive mindset. So if you're happy with your performance so far, that's good, but you still have a little way to go, and there's still an opportunity for you to solidify your marks, especially if you're aiming for the top grades. For those of you who don't feel so happy, first of all, don't panic. There's every chance that you may have done a lot better than you actually think you have done. It's pretty normal after exams to start worrying about what you could have done and what you should have done and what you did, and you start to worry about how you've answered, and is it the correct way? Was it the best way? Don't worry about it. It's in the past. There's nothing you can do about it now. You still have an opportunity to do well in these exams. Okay, so we're going to look at question 5 today for paper 2, and we're going to look at a sample answer that I've done, and we're going to look at some other examples as well and how to write a really good answer. Okay, so we're going to look at the mark scheme. The first thing that you need to think about is communicating clearly. That goes without saying. Obviously, if you don't communicate clearly, then it's going to be very difficult for your examiner to understand what you're talking about. You need to be imaginative as well. So try and think about a perspective, a way of answering your question that maybe is a bit different to the other people. Maybe go against what is the norm or what you would expect to be the norm. So, for example, in my answer, I've actually argued that, well, the question was whether or not homework still has any value. But I've actually argued that homework is outdated and it's unnecessary weight on the shoulders of young people. Okay, so move down to content. You need to make sure your register is convincing and compelling for the audience. So register just basically means you're using the right words for the right topic. So if you're talking about sports, you need to have sports vocabulary. If you're talking about things like social media, you need to have the right vocabulary for that, and education, and so on and so forth. Match to purpose. So this just means if it's an article, it needs to look like an article. If it's a letter, it should look like a letter, and so on and so forth. We'll look at the forms of those as well. Extensive and ambitious vocabulary. Try and use interesting words. Try not to use too many simple words in your writing. And sustained crafting of linguistic devices. This is a bit of a controversial or a bit of a confusing topic at the moment, because as you can see, it's right there in the mark scheme, but AQA issued a report which basically said that most of the students weren't very successful at using linguistic devices. And what seems to be the problem is that students all remember deforest and all the other mnemonics as well. But what happens is they were just sort of throwing them in without really thinking about how they are affecting the meaning of the answer that they're trying to portray. So it's very important that you think about the effect that you're trying to achieve, and that's why they've included this word crafting. It means that you're mindful about how you're using linguistic devices. And the truth about that is that it's going to be very difficult for you to be mindful about them, to create interesting and effective linguistic devices without practicing it beforehand. Okay, so in these next days, the next day and a half before your exams, try and practice some writing, even if it's just a couple of paragraphs or something like that. Try and create linguistic devices, use sort of metaphors, alliteration, similes, and so on and so forth. You'll find that most of them are not really that difficult to do. You just have to think about it a little bit more. Another way to improve your skills on that is to read professional writers' writing. So, for example, if you go to The Guardian, you'll see a lot of the samples and the inserts that AQA uses are actually from The Guardian. So that's where they get their text from. So if you look at this one, students are at breaking point in a broken system. I'm pretty sure a lot of you can relate to that. So there you've got the repetition of breaking, broken. Breaking point as well is a metaphor because students aren't literally breaking, but metaphorically they are, because they're finding that the exams are really stressful. So this is an interesting thing as well for you, is that sometimes it's really worth thinking about, what are you finding tough about these exams? Maybe it's worth actually expressing that in terms of maybe writing an article or writing a letter before your exam, just practicing that. So if you're feeling that the exams are really stressful, try and channel that stress into a letter or an article, and you'll find you'll probably be able to write something really interesting. And it's a way of sort of managing those emotions as well. Okay, so organization, that's an interesting one, an important one as well. So varied and inventive use of structural features. So you're just making sure that your paragraphs are structured in an interesting way. You can link them in more ways than one. So one way to link them is to use discourse markers, which they mention at the bottom here. But another way to do that is to include vocabulary from similar vocabulary in each paragraph. So you're showing that they're linked in that way. Other things that you can do are use ending on a sort of with a rhetorical question or cyclical structure. The ending is really important as well, because it creates a lot of impact, and it solidifies the points that you're trying to make in your in your argument. So if you end with a cyclical structure, what you'll have there is, so you make sure that something that you mentioned at the beginning, some profound point that you're trying to make at the beginning, that you mention that at the end again. If you combine that with a rhetorical question, then you've got quite a strong structural aspect to your writing. Okay, so we'll have a look at the sample answer which I've done. Before I do that, we're going to look at this mnemonic, and it's for linguistic devices. So it's called Mad Father's Crops, and I've actually adapted this from Mr. Saleh's Mad Father's Crock. The only reason why I changed it is because here you include personification and sibilance as well. So what do they stand for? M is metaphor, A alliteration, D direct address, facts, assonance, triadic structure, which is rule of three, hyperbole, emotive language, repetition, similes, contrast, rhetorical question, onomatopoeia, opinion, personification, and sibilance. So if you can remember that in your exam, just write it down and try it as you go along in your answer, and maybe just make sure you tick those off, or at least consciously just make sure you're putting them in there. Okay, so don't forget you need to use a variety of sentence types. Use a lot of punctuation as well, all the different punctuation marks that you can think of, and a variety of paragraph lengths as well. So this is the sample answer. Should homework be history? Let me zoom in on that so it's a bit easier for you to see. So should homework be history? So remember that the question was, does homework still have any value? And so what I've done in the title, you can use any technique that you want in the title. You can use a pun, you can use alliteration, you can use a metaphor, etc., etc. So you can see mine's a rhetorical question. I've also used alliteration, homework, and history. It's a pun at the same time. So should homework be history? Because obviously students do history as part of their homework. And at the same time, it's a metaphor which is suggesting that homework is outdated. And that's really the sort of the main, that's how I structure my answer. I've structured it around the idea that homework is outdated. Okay, so I'll read some of it to you. The time has come. Should homework be history? The time has come. A whole new ballgame of exams has landed, as tough as nails and walking a hard line to wake unsuspecting British youths from their slumber. It's a new horizon. Before too long, we'll be looking Finland and Shanghai in the eye and saying, we can read too. But there can only be one result in my analysis. More homework, more homework, more homework. Did I mention there'll be more homework? He's had a few stabs at this exam reform thing. You know, that Michael Gove guy, the educational secretary. Some say he's actually a mad scientist who uses students as exam guinea pigs. Who knows? But if students felt they were already weighed down enough by homework, they'd better get on their hands and knees and pray, otherwise they'll be reminded of Macbeth in more ways than one. Sleep no more. Shiny new GCSEs doth murder sleep, the innocent sleep. As old as time itself and loved by students like a soggy sandwich on a rainy day, homework has always been an unending, looping nightmare for youngsters. But now they must prepare for a different type of battle, the onslaught of a brand spanking new 9-to-1 nightmare designed to separate the wheat from the chaff, to help the cream rise to the top, a new law of the educational jungle, natural selection of the biggest brains, survival of the smartest. But is the whole educational system actually its own worst enemy? Let's face it, getting a completed set of homework from the current generation is like trying to draw blood from a stone. Getting a good set of homework is even worse. Excellent homework? Forget it. We've all seen the 9 a.m. classroom battle between teacher and pupil. It's as if the commander sent the lieutenant on a quest to find the elixir of knowledge, only for him to return with a pocket full of excuses he pulled out from somewhere in the back of his feeble imagination. The result? War. But who is really concealing a minefield of pride and self-delusion? I have to admit, I'm beginning to see it too. Homework, a fish out of water, a dinosaur in the eve of its own extinction, clinging desperately to life by the tips of its talons in the face of an inexorable new dawn. The technological age is here and about to consign homework to the history books. A few generations down the line, and homework may be nothing more than an atavistic memory of some ancient ancestors. That's us, by the way, some future ancient ancestors who couldn't think outside the box, like minds frozen in an archaic past. So there can only be two options, in my opinion. Resuscitate the thing, in other words, reimagine it, rework it, rebrand it, rethink it, just re-something it, or bury it altogether. Love it or hate it, the youth is plugged into the technological world, riding the crest of a giant wave of wonders, while we, like fools, fight the inevitable. But why not ride it too? Why not go with the flow? Let's rewire our minds. Teenagers love games, right? So let's give them games. Spellbinding educational games that use virtual reality to fire up imaginations and build real-world skills. And more virtual to reality games and competitions, please. Let's include engineering games into the mix. How about some science? Maths and English wouldn't go amiss either. Why not throw in some history? Love Facebook? Buy 20 minutes Facebook time by answering these 10 geography quiz questions. Make knowledge cool by celebrating high achievers. Let creativity and enjoyment lead the way. Infuse knowledge into students' day-to-day lives so they enjoy technology and education in a harmonious way, where learning and life are not antagonists but partners in greatness. This is not a white flag or the towel being thrown in, but a call to explore a paradigm shift away from the past and forward to the present. A new world is dawning and we can't beat it, so let's join it. Okay, so I've just tried to make sure that every single line I'm using at least one technique. In fact, you'll probably find that I'm using more than one technique. Now, obviously, for me to think of all of this in an exam situation is going to be really, really tough. In fact, I probably won't be able to do it. So what I've had to do is I've had to sit before the exams and think about how I'm actually saying these and try and work it out. And what I've done as well is I've tried to limit myself to... Now that's supposed to be, let's have a look. 680 words. So I got a little bit confused there because it says 1,105, and that's because I've included other stuff at the bottom there. Yeah, so what you do is in the exam, you're probably only going to be able to write between sort of 650 to 800 words. That's probably going to be your maximum. So what you do is before the exam, you write what you believe could be a perfect sample answer. Or you write maybe a couple of perfect sample answers, really working out how to use linguistic devices and metaphors and things like that. So let's have a look at it. So here I've said the time has come, so short sentence, semicolon, straight away. Okay, so remember semicolons you can use in between independent clauses. So you make sure that they separate the clauses, and the clauses have to be related to each other. They sort of explain each other. And yeah, so a whole new ball game of exams. So that's a metaphor. As tough as nails, simile. Walking a hard line, that's a metaphor again. Shake unsuspecting British youth from their slumber. So slumber will be a metaphor for basically saying that the exams are supposed to wake everyone up into a sort of new level of intellectual powers, if you want to call it that. We'll be looking Finland and Shanghai in the eye. So that's the point of these exams, is they're designed to put us on a more level footing with places like Finland and Shanghai, which are seen as the leading countries and cities in educational standards. So you can see this sort of isolated paragraph, just one word with ellipses there. Remember, ellipses show trailing thought. There can only be one result in my analysis. This is just another way of saying in my opinion. More homework, repetition. Did I mention there'll be more homework? So you've got repetition there again, and rhetorical question. He's had a few stabs at this exam reform thing. Stabs, again, metaphor. Some say he's actually a mad scientist. That's a metaphor again. that uses students as exam guinea pigs, metaphors. I've really focused a lot on metaphors because I think they're the most powerful linguistic devices. All the other devices that I've used, like similes and alliteration and things like that. So alliteration, if you look down here, tips off its talons. And that's just those who I've really used to sort of support the metaphors and add a little bit of variety to the article. Who's really concealing minefield of pride and self-delusion? I'll show you where I got that from later on. That's actually from a Guardian article. And yeah, so that's really it. I mean, you can obviously pause the video at certain points and have a look and see how I've used the linguistic devices. But I've just tried to use them in every single line. It'll take me ages to go through every single one of them, so I'm not going to do that right now. But you can do that by yourselves. You can take screenshots and print this off, or just look at it from your screens. So I wanted to show you a couple other examples. We were talking about where to find your inspiration. So this example I've found in a Formula One magazine. Very interesting imagery that he's used in writing this. So it's just the first couple of paragraphs in there. The off-track battle that will define F1's title fight. Hamilton versus Vettel for a fifth title is this year's headline contest, but the Mercedes versus Ferrari versus Red Bull super team slugfest will be just as ferocious. Ben Anderson takes a peek beneath the leading contenders' intricately sculpted forms. Formula One is a gladiatorial contest between drivers, a political dogfight between team bosses, but the true nature of the beast is a tireless pursuit of engineering excellence. Mostly, therefore, F1 is a battle of the brains, the ingenious ideas of the brightest minds forged in carbon fiber, pitted against those of their rivals. A skirmish of pens, drawing boards, and CAD machines, think to victory, design or die. The cars are as intricate as Swiss clockwork, the engines a complex mix of fuel-starved, turbocharged, gas recycling, electro-powered hybrid wizardry, capable of producing close to 1,000 brake horsepower. So you can see the imagery there is really, really interesting. It's brilliant use of imagery. So Super Team Slugfest, you've got the imagery of the slugfest, or like a fight. You've got the alliteration there as well, which really helps to emphasize and makes these words stand out. Ferocious is sort of animalistic adjectives. That's the connotations are of animalistic sort of energy and fighting and all that kind of stuff. Take a peek beneath the leading contender's intricately sculpted forms. So again, that's a metaphor. What he's really referring to there are the cars themselves. Formula One is a gladiatorial contest. So gladiatorial, so it's about heroism. It's an ancient sport, if you want to call it that. It's not really ancient, but it's quite old. And there's a lot of sort of glamour around it as well. A political dogfight. So there's politics in there. Dogfight, showing how brutal it is. The nature of the beast, pursuit of engineering excellence. So you've got alliteration there as well. So again, notice the high concentration of metaphors in this. Same as before, a battle of the brains, alliteration and metaphor. Ingenious ideas of the brightest minds forged in carbon fiber, brilliant use of metaphor again. As intricate as Swiss clockwork, simile, and hybrid wizardry, so it's almost magical what they're able to achieve with these cars. So now the next article is from The Guardian, and this is written by David Mitchell, and he's a comedian. So his article is going to be quite funny, and I'll show you how that works in a second. Minimal sense, smell of nothing but hypocrisy, alliteration, and metaphor, nothing but hypocrisy. Sorry, smell of nothing but hypocrisy. So metaphor again. The trend of undetectable perfume and no makeup conceals a minefield of vanity and self-delusion. So that's where I got my idea from. And again, it's a metaphor. There are two types of cosmetics in my analysis: lipstick and mascara. Oh, and blusher, hang on. And powder and eyeliner and moisturizer and perfume and hairspray. Blimey, there are loads. And styling mousse and hair dye and spray tan and unnecessary surgery. Do shaving products count? Maybe. Hats? No. Even tiny, sparkly, impractical hats that don't keep the rain off. So fascinators and tiaras and coronets and the like? No. I think we're entering the realm of clothes and jewelry. What about stick-on sequins and moustache wax? I'm thinking of changing my look. So look at the variety of sentence types they use. There's a lot of curtailed sentences showing a lot of quick change of thought and the sort of confusion of all these different types of cosmetics that are available. So yeah, curtail sentences, and yeah, just a lot of humor in this one. It's really interesting use of humor and creativity. There's another one down here as well, so you can type the title in and have a look on The Guardian for yourself. Okay, so I hope that's helped. I mean, you can have a look at these, and you can pause the video, go through some of the language, have a look at how it's been used. But as I said before, the key really is to focus on practicing before the exam. This one's quite difficult because it's quite difficult for you to think of these things on the spot. So if you practice before that, it's going to make it a lot easier for you in the exam. I hope this has helped, and if it did, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and see you soon.